As the war drums continue to beat around the world, more countries are shoring up their defenses. Japan is the latest to up its military spending now. On Friday, Tokyo vowed to increase its security spending to 2% of its GDP by 2027. What's the reason? China. In fact, Japan will amount, the increase that we're talking about is something that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida was blunt about why this militarization was needed.
Can
the current capability of the self-defense forces deter a threat to our country? When a threat becomes real, can they protect our country? We carried out a realistic simulation. To state it frankly, the current situation is insufficient.
Kishida called the new policy a turning point in history. One way that it changes things is that now Japan will acquire counter-strike capacity, which means it will gain the ability to hit launch sites that threaten the country. And for this, Japan will do at least two things, which is upgrade its existing weaponry and buy US-made Tomahawk missiles. Reportedly, up to 500 of them. The Tomahawk cruise missiles have a range of about 1,600 kilometers, enough range to directly attack China, North Korea, or Russia. Japan also plans to double army troops in the southwestern islands and strengthen its logistics. This is to enable the rapid deployment of troops from all over Japan in case of an emergency. Japan can now launch a counter-strike under 3 conditions. If Japan is attacked, an attack on a friendly nation threatens Japan's survival, there are no appropriate means to repel an attack. This means there is a change in Japan's relationship with the US as well. A 1960 security treaty was understood to mean that Japan served as a defensive shield and the US was the offensive spear. Now the two countries can collectively respond to an armed attack. So why exactly is Japan doing this? And who is it protecting itself from? Well, China. While Japan's national security strategy mentioned North Korea, Russia and China, special focus was given to Beijing. Japan has said that China poses the greatest strategic challenge ever to its security. While announcing the policy, Kishida did not mince his words.
I recognize that the present diplomatic and militaristic behavior of China poses a challenge to our efforts to maintain the peace and safety of Japan and the peace and stability of the international community and to solidify in the international order based on the rule of law.
China, of course, was not pleased with the new developments. It slammed Japan's accusations.
China is committed to upholding peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific and beyond. China is an opportunity and partner for all countries pursuing development. Japan disregards the facts, deviates from the common understandings between China and Japan and its commitment to bilateral relations, and discredits China. We are firmly opposed to this, and we have lodged solemn representations to make clear our position through diplomatic channels.
Japan still maintains that it has an exclusively defense-oriented policy, that its progress as a peaceful nation will remain unchanged. But it seems like the specter of war that is blanketing the world, the pacifist island nation seems to be readying itself for battle. For more on this, with me on the broadcast is Peter Kosnick, who is a professor of history and director of the Nuclear Studies Institute at American University. Thanks very much for being here on the broadcast. I have to begin by asking you for your assessment of this latest move by Japan. Of course, a lot of questions that are being raised over why this move has taken place and the messaging that Japan is trying to send out, given that it is a pacifist island nation.
We have to put this in the context of overall U.S. strategy in the region. The United States has long been urging Japan to increase its military spending. And now, with the recent tensions over Taiwan, presumably the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the North Korean missile launches, that whole region has been heating up and becoming a powder keg that could easily explode. Japan is going along with that now, which is unfortunate, because Japan had long been a brake upon the militarization of the region. The people around the world took great pride in Article 9 in the Japanese Constitution. Japan had rejected the idea of offensive military forces and war as a solution to problems. And there had been a long, this was implemented in large part by the United States after World War II. During the Korean War, the United States wanted Japan to abrogate Article 9 and the Peace Constitution and support the United States militarily during the Korean War, but the Japanese resisted. And I've watched over the decades as there's been a concerted effort to convince the Japanese people that they are at risk, that there is a serious threat, and that they need to abandon their peace constitution. Well, we've seen this gradually eroding during the Abe years, and now Kishida is taking it one step further.
Right.
And Japan not only is becoming a normal military country, it's going to soon have the third biggest military budget in the world. And that's a pretty frightening development.
Let me then ask you this. How real is the threat of China for Japan? What do you make of China's posturing and its moves in the recent past?
Well, China has been dramatically increasing its military capabilities. Not only its conventional capabilities, its sea capabilities, but also its nuclear capabilities. And that is an ominous development. China had always known and understood that even having a very small deterrent was effective enough. But now, so they limited it to about 200 nuclear weapons, unlike the United States and Russia, which have close to 7,000 at this point. But now China, at least according to the U.S. Pentagon, is planning to increase to 1,000 nuclear weapons by the end of this decade and 1,500 by 2035. We don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's what the Pentagon is projecting. And that goes along with an overall strengthening of China's capabilities. The U.S. has been quite aggressive in this regard. It was under the Trump administration that the U.S. intensified the ties with Taiwan and also the provocations against China and the questioning of the one China policy. Now, the Biden administration, when Biden came to power, people, at least many people in the United States, hoped that Biden would break with the hostile policies toward China. But Biden has instead doubled down on them and actually exacerbated the tensions. So we've got a very dangerous situation throughout that region. And if you look at who Biden brought in as his top advisors, he's got 18 top advisors from the Center for New American Security.
Right.
These are the China hawks. And they're also Russia hawks, but they're especially China hawks. So it's Campbell and Ratner and Sullivan and people who were responsible for the Asia pivot under the Obama administration, the advisors to Hillary Clinton when she called for the Asia pivot, and now are there influencing the Biden policy. So what we've seen is an aggressive U.S. stance, effectively talking about building up an Asia NATO.
Right.
And that'll include Japan, South Korea, Australia. They would like to get India more involved, but India is, hedging its bets in that regard. And so we're seeing this dangerous tendency toward a new Cold War, a new bipolar world. And we've seen it around Ukraine. We're seeing it now around Taiwan. And both of those situations have the potential to develop into a World War III situation. So we have to take this quite seriously, and we have to dial down the rhetoric, try to dial down the militarism on all sides and the threats, because we've created a very, very dangerous global situation now.
All right.
Which everybody is guilty in this regard.
All right, Peter, we're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for being here on the broadcast. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.